Document: one human warship. Countless worlds turned to dust. Best HFY Sci-Fi. The stars outside the cracked viewport shimmered like cold diamonds against the endless blackness of space. Inside the bridge of the Invincible, Captain Ryan. Carter stood with his hands clasped tightly behind his back, staring out at the void. His face was lined with fatigue, his dark hair streaked with gray, but his eyes burned with a quiet determination that had kept him and his crew alive this long. The ship groaned softly around him, its metal bones creaking under the strain of countless battles and repairs made with whatever scraps they could find. Behind him, Lieutenant Ava Monroe adjusted the settings on her console. She glanced up at Ryan's rigid posture and sighed. "We're running low on fuel again, sir," she said, her voice calm but tinged with worry. "If we don't refuel soon, we won't even make it to the next system." Ryan didn't turn. "I know," he replied simply. His tone was flat, but Ava caught the edge of frustration beneath it. They all knew how dire their situation was. For months now, the Invincible had been the last human warship still standing after the alien coalition, known only as the Syndicate, had swept through humanity's colonies like a plague. Colony after colony fell, their skies lit up by burning, cities and shattered ships, billions dead, entire worlds turned to dust. Chief Engineer Lucas Drake shuffled onto the bridge, wiping grease-streaked hands on his uniform. He looked older than he had when they first set out, his once bright blue eyes dulled by exhaustion. "Captain," he began, leaning against the nearest console, "the reactor's holding together for now, but if we push it any harder, we're looking at a meltdown. We need time to patch things up properly." Ryan finally turned away from the viewport. "Time is something we don't have," he said sharply. His gaze softened slightly as he added, "I'll figure something out." Before anyone could respond, the ship shuddered violently, throwing everyone off balance. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the dimly lit bridge. Navigator Daniel Hayes scrambled to his station, fingers flying over the controls. "Incoming transmission," he called out, his voice rising above the noise. "It's encrypted. Looks like it's coming from Epsilon 9. Ryan frowned. Epsilon 9 was supposed to be abandoned, a research outpost on the fringes of human territory. What could possibly be transmitting from there? "Decipher it," he ordered, moving closer to Daniel's station. A moment later, a distorted voice crackled through the speakers. It was faint, almost drowned out by static, but unmistakably human. "To whoever receives this. My name is Dr. Emily Ross and I'm stationed at Epsilon 9. Critical data. Weapon prototype. Can end the war." The message cut off abruptly, leaving silence in its wake. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. A weapon prototype? Could it really be true? Or was this some kind of trap set by the Syndicate? "It's too risky," Ava said firmly, breaking the silence. "Even if it's real, Epsilon 9 is deep in enemy territory. If we go there, we're walking straight into a hornet's nest." "And if we don't?" Ryan countered, his voice steady. "What happens if she's telling the truth? This could be our only chance to strike back." Lucas shook his head. "With respect, Captain, this ship can barely limp across the galaxy as it is. Pushing further into Syndicate space is suicide." Ryan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at the blinking coordinates displayed on Daniel's screen. Epsilon 9 wasn't far, relatively speaking, but getting there would mean navigating through heavily patrolled regions. Every instinct told him to ignore the message, to focus on keeping his crew alive. But another part of him, the part that refused to give up, clung to the hope that maybe, just maybe, salvation lay at the end of those coordinates. "Set a course for Epsilon 9, he said finally, his decision made. "Full stealth mode, and prep the jump drive. We move within the hour." Ava opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. Arguing with Ryan was pointless once he'd made up his mind. Instead, she nodded sharply and returned to her station, muttering under her breath about reckless captains and impossible odds. As the crew sprang into action, Ryan allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He thought about Earth, the blue-green orb he hadn't seen in years, and wondered if it was still intact. The Syndicate had never directly attacked the homeworld, perhaps out of arrogance or strategy, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Humanity's days were numbered unless someone did something drastic. That someone, it seemed, was going to be him. Hours later, the Invincible slipped silently through the darkness, its engines purring softly as it entered the outer rim of Syndicate-controlled space. Ryan stood on the bridge once more, watching the stars blur past as the ship accelerated toward Epsilon 9. Whatever awaited them there, whether salvation or destruction, he and his crew were ready to face it head-on. Because in a universe where countless worlds had already turned to dust, one human warship remained, and as long as it flew, there was still hope. Document: one human warship. Countless worlds turned to dust. Best HFY Sci-Fi. The journey to Epsilon 9 was tense and silent, save for the hum of the Invincible's engines. The crew worked tirelessly, each member focused on their task, as the ship crept deeper into enemy territory. Every jump through hyperspace brought them closer to danger, but also closer to answers, or so they hoped. Captain Ryan Carter paced the bridge, his boots echoing softly against the metal floor. He glanced at the glowing map displayed on the main screen, tracking their progress. Epsilon 9 wasn't far now, but the Syndicate's presence loomed large in the surrounding systems. Lieutenant Ava Monroe sat at her station, her fingers hovering over the controls as she monitored for any signs of alien activity. Her sharp green eyes darted between screens, searching for anything that might give away their position. "Still clear," she reported quietly, though her tone betrayed her unease. She didn't trust this mission. It felt too convenient, too much like a trap. But orders were orders, and Ryan had made it clear they weren't turning back. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Lucas Drake was elbow-deep in wires, trying to keep the ship's aging systems running smoothly. Sweat dripped down his forehead as he cursed under his breath. "Come on, you old bucket of bolts," he muttered, tightening a loose connection. The reactor groaned in response, its vibrations rattling the walls around him. He knew the ship couldn't take much more abuse. If they ran into trouble, they'd be lucky to make it out in one piece. Navigator Daniel Hayes kept his focus on plotting the safest route through the asteroid fields ahead. His hands moved deftly across the console, adjusting their course to avoid detection. "We're approaching the first checkpoint," he announced, glancing up at Ryan. "If we stick close to these rocks, we should be able to slip past the patrols." Ryan nodded. "Good work, Daniel. Keep us hidden." As they navigated the treacherous field, the crew held their breath. Asteroids tumbled past the windows, some close enough to scrape the hull. Any misstep could send them careening into disaster. Ava tightened her grip on the armrests of her chair, her knuckles white. "This is insane," she whispered to herself. But insanity was becoming normal for them. They'd been living on the edge for months, surviving by sheer willpower and blind luck. Hours passed, and the tension aboard the ship grew thicker with every passing minute. Then, without warning, alarms blared again. Red lights flashed across the bridge as Daniel shouted, "Syndicate cruiser detected! They're scanning the area." Ryan's jaw clenched. "Shut everything down, go dark." Ava quickly powered down non-essential systems, plunging the ship into near silence. The only sounds were the faint hum of life support and the occasional creak of the hull. Everyone froze, waiting for the worst. Outside, the massive alien cruiser drifted ominously close, its sleek design a stark contrast to the battered hulk of the Invincible. Its scanners swept the area, probing for any sign of intruders. Lucas wiped his hands on a rag and hurried onto the bridge, his face pale. "If they find us, we're done for," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Our stealth systems aren't built to handle something like that." "They won't find us," Ryan replied firmly, though even he wasn't sure if he believed it. He stared at the viewport, watching as the cruiser lingered just a few kilometers away. It felt like an eternity before it finally moved on, disappearing into the distance. Once the immediate threat was gone, the crew exhaled in unison. Ava slumped back in her seat, relief washing over her. That was too close, she said, shaking her head. We can't keep doing this, Captain. Sooner or later, our luck's going to run out. Ryan didn't respond. He knew she was right, but there was no other choice. Turning back wasn't an option, not when the fate of humanity might depend on what lay ahead. Finally, after what felt like days, they reached Epsilon 9. The planet came into view, its surface scarred and barren. What had once been a thriving research outpost was now a wasteland, its buildings reduced to rubble by Syndicate bombardment. Smoke still rose from craters scattered across the landscape, evidence of the recent attack. This doesn't look promising, Daniel murmured, his voice heavy with dread. Looks like the Syndicate got here before us. Ryan studied the desolate scene outside. Maybe not, he said. Dr. Ross's transmission came from somewhere on this planet. If she's still alive, she'll be underground. Start scanning for any signs of activity. Ava adjusted her sensors, narrowing the search parameters. After several minutes, she frowned. I'm picking up faint energy readings, coming from a bunker about 2 clicks north of here. That's our target, Ryan declared. Prep a landing team, we're going down there. Lucas stepped forward, concern etched on his face. Captain, are you sure about this? That bunker could be crawling with aliens, or worse, booby-trapped. We don't have a choice, Ryan replied. If Dr. Ross has something that can help us fight back, we need to find it. With little time to waste, Ryan assembled a small team consisting of himself, Ava, and 2 Marines, Corporal Ben Turner and Private Mia Chen. They suited up in combat gear, checking their weapons one last time before boarding the shuttle. As they descended toward the planet's surface, the air grew thick with ash and smoke, making visibility nearly impossible. Once on the ground, the team moved cautiously through the ruins, their boots crunching against shattered glass and debris. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant rumble of collapsing structures. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every sound a potential ambush. Ryan led the way, his rifle raised as he scanned for hostiles. After navigating through the wreckage, they reached the entrance to the bunker, a reinforced steel door partially buried beneath rubble. Corporal Turner set to work prying it open while the others stood guard. When the door finally gave way, they stepped inside, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. The interior was damp and cold, the air stale with the scent of decay. Empty corridors stretched out before them, lined with broken equipment and overturned tables. It was clear the place had been abandoned in a hurry. Ryan motioned for the team to spread out, calling out softly, "Dr. Ross, are you here?" For a moment, there was no response. Then, a weak voice called back from somewhere deeper in the bunker. "Over here." They followed the sound, moving carefully until they found her huddled in a corner, wrapped in a tattered blanket. Dr. Emily Ross looked frail, her face gaunt and streaked with dirt. Her once pristine lab coat was torn and bloodied, but her eyes lit up with recognition when she saw Ryan. "You came," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I wasn't sure anyone would." Ryan knelt beside her, helping her to her feet. "What do you have for us, Doctor?" he asked, his tone urgent. She hesitated, then pulled a data chip from her pocket. "This contains the schematics for Project Eclipse," she explained. "It's a weapon unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen. With it, we can turn the tide of this war." But as she handed over the chip, her expression darkened. "Be warned, it comes at a cost, and the Syndicate knows about it. That's why they attacked this place." Ryan exchanged a glance with Ava, who looked skeptical but determined. Whatever risks lay ahead, they had no choice but to press on. Humanity's survival depended on it. End document. Document. One human warship. Countless worlds turned to dust. Best HFY Sci-Fi. Dr. Emily Ross leaned heavily on Ryan's arm as the team made their way back to the shuttle. Her legs wobbled with each step, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. "I haven't eaten in days," she admitted weakly, clutching the data chip tightly in one hand. "And I don't think I've slept since the attack." Ryan nodded grimly. "We'll get you aboard the ship soon. Just hold on a little longer." Behind them, Corporal Ben Turner and Private Mia Chen kept watch, their rifles sweeping the shadows. The bunker was eerily quiet, but none of them trusted the silence. Every corner they turned felt like it could hide an ambush. Ava brought up the rear, her flashlight cutting through the darkness as she scanned for movement. As they reached the main corridor leading to the exit, a low rumble echoed through the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling and the floor beneath their feet trembled slightly. Dr. Ross froze, her eyes wide with panic. "What was that?" she whispered. "Probably just settling debris," Ryan said, though his tone lacked conviction, quickened their pace, urging the group forward. But before they could reach the exit, the ground shook again. Harder this time. A loud crash reverberated through the bunker, followed by the unmistakable sound of metal scraping against metal. "They're here," Ava said sharply, her voice tight with alarm. She pointed her flashlight down the corridor, where faint red lights were beginning to flicker into existence. Syndicate drones. Sure enough, moments later, the first wave of mechanical scouts appeared, their insect-like bodies skittering across the floor. Glowing red sensors scanned the area, locking onto the humans almost instantly. Without hesitation, Ben and Mia opened fire, their shots echoing loudly in the confined space. "Move!" Ryan barked, pulling Dr. Ross along as he led the group toward the exit. They ran as fast as they could, dodging falling debris and returning fire whenever possible. The drones pursued relentlessly, their movements unnervingly precise. Ahead, the steel door they had pried open earlier was now partially closed, likely triggered by the Syndicate's arrival. "We're not going to make it," Mia shouted, firing over her shoulder as another drone exploded behind them. "Yes, we are," Ryan snapped. "Ben, help me with this door." The two men threw their weight against the heavy steel panel, forcing it open just wide enough for the team to squeeze through. Ava and Mia ushered Dr. Ross outside first, then covered the others as they exited the bunker. Once everyone was clear, they sprinted toward the waiting shuttle, its engines already roaring to life. But even as they climbed aboard, the danger wasn't over. More Syndicate forces were converging on their position, including a massive transport ship descending from the sky. Its shadow loomed over the ruins, blotting out what little sunlight filtered through the ash-filled atmosphere. "Go, go, go!" Ryan yelled as he strapped himself in. The pilot didn't need to be told twice. The shuttle lifted off the ground, weaving erratically to avoid incoming fire. Explosions rocked the air around them, sending shockwaves rippling through the craft. Back aboard. The Invincible. Chief Engineer Lucas Drake watched anxiously as the shuttle approached. When it finally docked, he rushed to meet the team, his face pale with worry. "What happened down there?" he asked as they hurried. "Inside. No time to explain," Ryan replied tersely. "Get us out of here now." Lucas didn't argue. He bolted back to the engine room, shouting orders to the crew. Moments later, the Invincible lurched forward, its damaged systems straining to accelerate away from Epsilon 9. The Syndicate. Transport ship gave chase, unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts that narrowly missed the fleeing warship. On the bridge, Daniel Hayes worked frantically to plot a safe escape route. "We can't outrun them forever," he warned. "Their weapons are too powerful." "Then we'll have to fight," Ryan said firmly. Turning to Ava, he added, "Prepare the turrets. Let's see if we can buy ourselves some breathing room." Ava nodded and relayed the order to the gunner stationed throughout the ship. As the Invincible banked sharply to avoid another volley of enemy fire, the turrets roared to life, spitting streams of energy at the pursuing transport. Several shots struck true, peppering the alien vessel with scorch marks, but it barely slowed down. Meanwhile, Dr. Ross sat hunched in a corner of the bridge, clutching the data chip tightly. She looked exhausted but resolute. "You need to see this," she told Ryan, holding out the chip. "It's important." Ryan hesitated, torn between focusing on the battle and listening to what she had to say. Finally, he motioned for Ava to take command temporarily and stepped aside to speak with Dr. Ross. "What is it?" he asked, his tone clipped. She inserted the chip into a nearby console, bringing up a series of schematics and equations. "This is Project Eclipse," she explained, pointing to a diagram of a weapon unlike anything Ryan had ever seen. It uses quantum resonance to destabilize matter at a molecular level. In theory, it could destroy entire fleets with a single shot. Ryan stared at the screen, his mind racing. Such a weapon could indeed turn the tide of the war, but at what cost? How do we build it? He asked. That's the problem, Dr. Ross admitted, her voice dropping. The power requirements are astronomical. Even the Invincible's reactor isn't strong enough to sustain it. To use Eclipse, we'd need to channel every ounce of energy the ship produces, and even then, it might not be enough. Ryan frowned. So what you're saying is using this weapon could destroy us as well? Dr. Ross nodded grimly. There's no guarantee the ship, or anyone on board, would survive. But if we don't try, humanity will lose this war. That's why I stayed behind after the attack. I knew someone would come eventually. Someone desperate enough to take the risk. Ryan didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to watch the ongoing battle outside. The Syndicate transport was closing in, its cannons charging for another devastating strike. Behind him, Ava called out, "Captain, we can't keep this up much longer. We're losing shields." He clenched his fists, weighing the options. If they didn't act soon, they'd be obliterated. But if they used Project Eclipse, they might doom themselves regardless. For a moment, doubt crept into his mind. Was this truly worth it? Then he remembered the faces of the people counting on him. The survivors scattered across the galaxy, clinging to hope despite overwhelming odds. Humanity hadn't survived this long by giving up. And neither would he. "Lucas," Ryan said into the comm system, his voice steady, "start integrating Project Eclipse into the ship's systems. We're going to use it." Static crackled for a moment before Lucas's stunned reply came through. "Captain, are you sure about this? This could kill us all." "I'm sure," Ryan replied without hesitation. "Do it." As the crew scrambled to carry out his orders, Ryan returned to the viewport. Outside, the Syndicate transport loomed larger than ever, its weapons glowing ominously. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain. Humanity would not go quietly into the night. End document. Document. One human warship. Countless worlds turned to dust. Best HFY Sci-Fi. The tension aboard. The Invincible was unbearable. Every member of the crew moved with frantic urgency, their faces etched with determination and fear. Chief Engineer Lucas Drake stood in the heart of the ship, surrounded by tangled wires and glowing panels as he worked to integrate Project Eclipse into the warship's systems. His hands trembled slightly as he connected the final circuit, sweat dripping from his brow. "This is insane," he muttered to himself, shaking his head. "We're turning this ship into a bomb." Nearby, Dr. Emily Ross hovered anxiously, clutching her notes and offering guidance whenever she could. "It has to be precise," she reminded him, her voice strained. "If we overload any part of the reactor, the entire system will fail before we even get a shot off." Lucas shot her a sharp look. "You think I don't know that?" he snapped, then immediately softened. "Sorry, Doc, this isn't exactly standard procedure." Dr. Ross nodded, understanding the weight of what they were attempting. She glanced toward the viewport where the massive Syndicate transport loomed closer with each passing second. Its cannons glowed brighter, preparing for another devastating barrage. Time was running out. On the bridge, Captain Ryan Carter paced back and forth, his mind racing. Lieutenant Ava Monroe sat at her station, monitoring the ship's shields as they flickered dangerously low. "Captain, we've lost 30% of our shielding," she reported grimly. "Another direct hit and we're done." Ryan clenched his jaw. "Keep them distracted," he ordered. "Aim for their engines. If we can slow them down, it'll buy us more time." Ava relayed the command to the gunners, who unleashed another volley of fire from the turrets. Several shots struck the transport's hull, but the alien ship barely flinched. Its advanced armor absorbed most of the damage, leaving only superficial scars behind. Still, the attack forced the Syndicate vessel to adjust its course, giving the Invincible a brief reprieve. In the engine room, Lucas shouted over the noise of grinding metal and sparking circuits. "I need someone to reroute auxiliary power to the main grid," he called out. Private Mia Chen, who had been assisting with repairs, scrambled to comply. Her hands moved quickly across the controls, diverting energy from non-essential systems like life support and lighting. "This is going to hurt," Mia said under her breath as the temperature inside the ship began to rise. Lights dimmed, casting the corridors in shadow. The hum of the reactor grew louder, vibrating through the walls like an angry beast. Back on the bridge, Navigator Daniel Hayes plotted their position, calculating the optimal range for firing Project Eclipse. "We need to get within 20 kilometers of the transport," he told Ryan. "Any farther and the weapon might not penetrate their defenses." Ryan nodded. "Daniel, plot a collision course. Use evasive maneuvers to keep them guessing until we're close enough." Daniel's eyes widened. "A collision course? Sir, if we miss, we won't," Ryan interrupted firmly. His tone left no room for argument. He turned to Ava. "As soon as we're in range, give me a countdown, and make sure everyone knows what's coming." Ava hesitated, her usual calm demeanor cracking slightly. "Do you really think this is going to work?" Ryan met her gaze, his expression unwavering. "It has to. For all of us." Word spread quickly among the crew. Some reacted with grim acceptance, others with quiet despair. Corporal Ben Turner tightened the straps on his helmet, muttering a silent prayer. Mia Chen hugged her knees in a corner, staring at the floor as tears streamed down her face. Even hardened veterans like Ava struggled to maintain composure, knowing that survival was far from guaranteed. The Invincible closed the distance to the Syndicate transport. The enemy ship unleashed another wave of plasma bolts. Shields flared brightly, absorbing the impact but weakening further. Warning alarms blared throughout the ship, adding to the chaos. 10 kilometers, Daniel shouted, his voice rising above the din. 5 kilometers. 3. Ryan gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. "Prepare to fire, Eclipse," he commanded. Dr. Ross stood nearby, clutching her datapad. "Once it's activated, there's no turning back," she warned. "The reactor will overload in seconds." "I understand," Ryan replied, his voice steady despite the storm raging around him. "Do it." Lucas flipped the final switch in the engine room, channeling every ounce of energy into Project Eclipse. The ship shuddered violently as the EB weapon powered up, its core glowing an eerie blue. Lights flickered wildly and sparks flew from overloaded panels. Somewhere deep within the ship, a pipe burst, sending steam hissing into the air. 2 kilometers, Daniel yelled. 1 kilometer. Fire, Ryan bellowed. At his command, Dr. Ross pressed the activation button on her console. A deafening roar filled the ship as Project Eclipse discharged, unleashing a blinding beam of energy that tore through space like a bolt of lightning. The Syndicate transport didn't stand a chance. The beam struck its target dead center, piercing through the alien ship's armor as if it were made of paper. For a split second, the transport lit up like a miniature sun, before exploding in a cataclysmic blast that sent shockwaves rippling outward. But victory came at a cost. Back aboard. The Invincible. The reactor screamed in protest as it reached critical levels. Alarms wailed and the lights went out entirely, plunging the ship into darkness. Emergency systems kicked in, bathing the interior in dim red light. "We're losing containment," Lucas shouted, frantically trying to stabilize the reactor. "Evacuate the engine room." Crew members fled as flames erupted from exposed conduits, filling the air with smoke. Ryan grabbed a comm unit, his voice cutting through the chaos. "All hands, brace for impact. Abandon ship if you can." Dr. Ross stumbled onto the bridge, coughing from the thickening smoke. "It's too late," she gasped. "The reactor's going to blow." Ryan nodded, his expression grim. "Then let's make sure it counts." Outside, the remnants of the Syndicate fleet scattered, retreating from the scene of devastation. The explosion of their flagship had sent a clear message. Humanity wasn't defeated yet. But aboard the Invincible, hope mingled with despair as the crew prepared for the inevitable. Ava clung to her seat, tears streaming down her face. "Was it worth it?" she whispered. Ryan placed a hand on her shoulder, offering what little comfort he could. "Yes," he said softly, "because now they'll remember. They'll remember that we fought, that we refused to give up." Seconds later, the reactor breached, engulfing the ship in a brilliant flash of light. When the glow faded, nothing remained of the Invincible, save for the echoes of its sacrifice. End document. Document. One human warship, countless worlds turned to dust. Best HFY Sci-Fi. The Syndicate fleet scattered like leaves in a storm, their once unstoppable armada reduced to chaos. The explosion of their flagship had been so massive that it left behind a gaping void in space, a testament to the power of Project Eclipse. Shattered debris floated aimlessly, and the remaining alien ships retreated hastily, abandoning their pursuit. For the first time in months, the galaxy seemed eerily quiet. But aboard the Invincible, the silence was anything but peaceful. The reactor's breach had torn through the ship's core, leaving behind only fragments of what had once been humanity's last hope. Fires raged unchecked in the corridors, consuming everything in their path. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows on the walls. The air grew thick with smoke, making it hard to breathe. Captain Ryan Carter stood on the bridge, his uniform singed and his face streaked with soot. He coughed violently, clutching the edge of a console for support. Around him, the few remaining crew members struggled to stay alive. Lieutenant Ava Monroe lay slumped against her station, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. Her eyes fluttered open as she fought to regain consciousness. "Captain?" she croaked, her voice barely audible over the crackling flames. What happened?" Ryan knelt beside her, helping her sit up. "We did it," he said, though his tone carried no triumph. "The Syndicate fleet is gone, but—" He trailed off, glancing at the destruction surrounding them. There was no need to say more. They both knew the ship wouldn't last much longer. Dr. Emily Ross stumbled onto the bridge, her lab coat torn and her hands trembling. She looked around at the devastation, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never thought it would end like this." Ryan shook his head. "You gave us a fighting chance," he replied firmly. "That's more than anyone else could have done." Private Mia Chen limped into the room, dragging Corporal Ben Turner with her. His leg was badly injured, and he winced with every step. "We're not going to make it, are we?" Mia asked, her voice hollow. Ryan hesitated, then nodded. "Probably not. But we've already done something incredible. We've shown the universe that humanity doesn't go quietly into the night." Mia sank to the floor, cradling Ben's head in her lap. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the sounds of the dying ship. Nearby, Chief Engineer Lucas Drake staggered in, his face pale and his breathing labored. He leaned heavily against the wall, clutching his side where shards of metal had pierced his skin. "The reactor's completely gone," Lucas reported, his voice weak. "We've got maybe 10 minutes before this whole thing comes apart." Ryan clenched his fists, forcing himself to think clearly despite the despair pressing down on him. "We need to get everyone to the escape pods," he ordered. "If we can save even one person, it'll be worth it." Ava pushed herself to her feet, wobbling slightly as she regained her balance. "There aren't enough pods for all of us," she reminded him. "And some of them might not even work after that blast." "I know," Ryan admitted. "But we have to try." The group moved quickly, carrying the wounded and helping each other navigate the crumbling ship. Flames licked at their heels as they made their way to the escape pod bay, dodging falling debris and collapsing floors. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of their situation crushing them. When they finally reached the bay, they found the area in shambles. Several pods had already been destroyed by the explosion, their hatches blown open and interiors scorched. Only 3 functioning pods remained, barely enough to hold half the surviving crew. Ryan stepped forward, taking charge. "Priority goes to the injured and those who can still fight," he said, his voice firm despite the pain etched on his face. Everyone else stays behind. Protests erupted immediately. "No!" Mia shouted, tears streaming down her face. "We can't just leave you here." "I'm staying too," Lucas added, his voice resolute. "Someone needs to keep the reactors stable until the last possible second." Ryan turned to face them, his expression softening. "This isn't about heroics," he said. "It's about survival. Humanity needs people like you to carry the torch, to remember what we did here today." One by one, the crew began boarding the pods, their faces filled with sorrow but also determination. Dr. Ross hesitated, gripping the data chip containing Project Eclipse's schematics tightly in her hand. "Take this," she told Ava, pressing it into her palm. "Make sure someone finds it, someone who can finish what we started." Ava nodded, slipping the chip into her pocket. "I will," she promised. As the final pod launched, carrying the survivors away from the doomed warship, Ryan and the others who stayed behind gathered on the bridge. The flames were closer now, licking at the edges of the room. Smoke filled the air, making it almost impossible to see or breathe. Lucas sat slumped against a console, his breathing shallow. "Guess this is it," he said with a weak smile. "Not a bad way to go, all things considered." Ryan placed a hand on his shoulder. "You did good, Lucas. Better than anyone could have asked for." Ben Turner, propped up against a wall, raised a shaky fist in salute. "For Earth," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "For Earth," the others echoed, their voices filled with emotion. Outside, the remnants of the Invincible began to break apart, its hull cracking under the strain of the failing reactor. Explosions rippled across its surface, sending chunks of metal spiraling into space. The ship that had carried humanity's hopes and dreams was now little more than a burning husk. But even as it fell apart, its legacy endured. Farther away, the escape pods drifted silently through the void, carrying the survivors toward safety, and carrying with them the memory of those who had given everything for the chance to live another day. In the distance, the retreating syndicate fleet sent out a transmission to their leaders. "The humans have struck back. Their weapon is beyond anything we anticipated. Proceed with caution." And somewhere among the stars, the echoes of the Invincible's sacrifice would inspire others to rise up, to fight back, and to reclaim what had been lost. End document. Document. One human warship, countless worlds turned to dust. Best HFY Sci-Fi. The escape pods drifted silently through the cold emptiness of space, their occupants battered but alive. Inside one of the pods, Lieutenant Ava Munro stared out at the wreckage of the Invincible, her heart heavy with grief. The once proud warship was now a cloud of debris, its pieces floating aimlessly like fragments of a shattered dream. She clenched her fists tightly, trying to hold back tears, but they came anyway, slipping down her cheeks in silent streams. Beside her, Dr. Emily Ross sat hunched over, clutching her knees to her chest. Her eyes were fixed on the glowing embers of the destroyed ship, her expression blank but her mind racing. "They gave everything," she murmured, almost to herself. "Ryan, Lucas, all of them. They stayed so we could live." Ava nodded slowly, her throat tight. "And now it's up to us to make sure their sacrifice wasn't for nothing." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the data chip containing the schematics for Project Eclipse. It felt impossibly small in her hand, yet it carried the weight of humanity's last hope. "We have to get this to someone who can use it." Private Mia Chen sat across from them, cradling Corporal Ben Turner's head in her lap. His leg injury had worsened during the escape, and he was barely conscious now, his breathing shallow and uneven. Mia brushed a strand of hair from his face, her hands trembling. "Do you think anyone will find us out here?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with fear. "We have to believe they will," Ava replied, forcing a note of confidence into her tone. "If we give up now, then everything Ryan and the others did was for nothing." Dr. Ross leaned forward, her voice firmer this time. There are still survivors out there. Hidden colonies, resistance fighters, people who haven't given up. We just need to reach them. Hours passed in silence as the pods continued their lonely journey. The survivors rationed what little food and water they had left, knowing they couldn't afford to waste anything. Every breath of recycled air felt precious, every heartbeat a reminder that they were still alive. Outside, the stars twinkled, coldly, indifferent to the struggles of the tiny specks of life drifting among them. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, one of the pods picked up a faint signal. It was weak and distorted, but unmistakably human. "Is anyone there?" A voice crackled over the comm system. "This is Outpost Delta 7. Respond if you can hear us." Ava lunged for the controls, her fingers flying over the console. "Delta 7, this is Lieutenant Ava Monroe of the Invincible. We're survivors of a battle with the Syndicate fleet. Request immediate assistance." There was a long pause before the voice responded. "The Invincible? That ship hasn't been heard from in months, are you sure?" "It's gone now," Ava said, her voice breaking slightly. "But we're all that's left. Please, we need help." Another pause, then. "Understood. Hold your position. We'll send a recovery vessel to retrieve you." Relief washed over the survivors, though it was tinged with exhaustion. They had made it this far, but their journey was far from over. As they waited for rescue, they took turns watching the scanner, ensuring no Syndicate ships were nearby. The last thing they needed was to be discovered by the enemy. When the recovery vessel finally arrived, it was a battered freighter called the Wanderer. Its hull was patched and scarred, evidence of years spent dodging both pirates and the Syndicate. Aboard the ship, a wiry man named Elias greeted them with a mixture of caution and curiosity. "You look like you've been through hell," he said, as he helped them aboard. "What happened out there?" Ava exchanged a glance with Dr. Ross before answering. "We took the fight to the Syndicate. We hit them hard, but it cost us everything." Elias nodded grimly, understanding the weight of her words. "Come on. Let's get you patched up and fed. You're safe here, for now." Over the next few days, the survivors recovered aboard the Wanderer. Ben Turner's condition stabilized, thanks to the ship's rudimentary medical supplies, though he remained weak and bedridden. Mia rarely left his side, tending to him with quiet determination. Meanwhile, Ava and Dr. Ross worked tirelessly to explain their mission to Elias and his crew. This weapon, Project Eclipse, it's humanity's best chance to turn the tide of the war, Ava explained during one such conversation. "But we need resources to build it. Ships, engineers, materials, everything we don't have right now." Elias rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Sounds risky. If the Syndicate finds out about this, they'll hunt you down without mercy." "They already know about it," Dr. Ross interjected. "That's why they attacked Epsilon 9. But they underestimated us and they paid the price." Elias studied her for a moment, then sighed. "I know some people who might be able to help. Resistance cells scattered across the galaxy. They've been waiting for a spark to ignite the flame. Maybe this is it." With the Wanderer's guidance, the group set course for a hidden moon where a small resistance outpost was rumored to exist. Along the way, Ava recorded a detailed account of their ordeal, documenting every detail of Project Eclipse and the sacrifices made to secure it. She knew the information had to survive, even if she didn't. When they finally reached the outpost, they found it bustling with activity. Men and women moved purposefully between makeshift shelters, their faces hardened by years of struggle. At the center of the camp stood a tall woman with sharp features and piercing gray eyes. Her name was Commander Elena Vega, and she wasted no time getting to the point. "So you're telling me you've got plans for a weapon that can take out entire fleets?" she asked, her tone skeptical but intrigued. "Yes," Ava replied, sliding the data chip across the table. "It's not perfect and building it won't be easy, but it's our only chance." Vega studied the chip for a moment, then looked up at Ava. "You realize what you're asking us to do? This isn't just about risking lives, it's about giving people hope." Hope is dangerous when you're fighting a war like this. Hope is all we have left, Ava countered. Without it, we're already dead. For a long moment, Vega said nothing. Then she nodded slowly. All right, I'll call a meeting with the other leaders. If we're going to do this, we'll need everyone on board. As the days turned into weeks, word spread among the resistance cells. Survivors who had given up hope began to rally around the idea of Project Eclipse, seeing it as a symbol of defiance against the overwhelming odds stacked against them. Teams of engineers pored over the schematics, devising ways to adapt the weapon for different ships and scenarios. Supplies were gathered, alliances forged, and plans laid for a coordinated strike against the Syndicate. Through it all, Ava kept thinking about Ryan and the others who had stayed behind on the Invincible. Their sacrifice had sparked something, a fire that refused to be extinguished. And though the road ahead would be long and fraught with danger, she knew they had taken the first step toward reclaiming humanity's place among the stars. In the quiet moments, as she gazed at the stars outside the outpost's windows, Ava whispered a promise to herself and to those who had fallen. "We'll finish what you started," she said softly, "no matter what it takes." End document. Document: one human warship, countless worlds turned to dust. Best HFY Sci-Fi. Months passed and the resistance grew stronger. The scattered survivors of humanity began to unite, drawn together by the promise of Project Eclipse. Outpost. Delta 7 became a hub of activity. Its once quiet moon transformed into a bustling center of preparation and planning. Engineers worked around the clock, their tools clanging against metal as they built new ships and modified old ones. Supplies poured in from hidden colonies and scavenged wrecks, each contribution a testament to the determination of those who refused to give up. Lieutenant Ava Monroe threw herself into the effort, her days filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and endless discussions about how to adapt Project Eclipse for mass production. She rarely slept, driven by the memory of Ryan and the others who had sacrificed everything. Every time she felt doubt creeping in, she touched the data chip tucked safely in her pocket, a reminder of why they were fighting. Commander Elena Vega proved to be an invaluable leader, her sharp mind and unyielding resolve inspiring confidence among the resistance fighters. Under her guidance, the disparate groups began to function as a single unit, pooling their resources and sharing intelligence. Slowly but surely, they pieced together a plan to strike back at the Syndicate. "We can't just hit them anywhere," Vega said during one of their late-night strategy meetings. "We need to aim for something that will cripple them, something they won't see coming." Dr. Emily Ross nodded, leaning forward in her chair. "Their supply lines are vulnerable. If we disrupt their resource shipments, it could weaken their entire fleet," Ava added. "And if we use Project Eclipse strategically, we can take out key targets without wasting its full potential. One well-placed shot could break their momentum." Vega's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Then let's focus on their main depot. It's heavily guarded, but if we can get close enough—" "It's risky," Mia Chen interrupted, speaking up for the first time. She had been quiet since their escape from the Invincible, her grief over Ben Turner's death still raw. "But it's also our best chance." Ben himself had recovered enough to join the discussions, though his leg injury left him unable to fight. Instead, he used his tactical expertise to help plan the assault, poring over maps and schematics with relentless focus. "If we time it right," he said, pointing to a diagram of the depot, "we can draw their forces away from the main facility. Then, while they're distracted, we hit them hard." The group agreed on the plan, and preparations intensified. Ships were retrofitted with experimental versions of Project Eclipse, their reactors pushed to the limit to power the weapon. Pilots trained tirelessly, learning how to handle the immense energy demands and the devastating recoil of firing such a device. Supplies were stockpiled, weapons checked and rechecked, and every possible scenario rehearsed until it became second nature. As the launch date approached, tensions ran high. Many of the fighters knew they might not return, but none of them hesitated. For the first time in years, they felt a sense of purpose, a belief that their actions could change the course of history. On the eve of the mission, Ava stood alone on the edge of the outpost, staring up at the stars. The night was cold, though air biting at her skin, but she barely noticed. Her mind was filled with memories of Ryan, Lucas, and the rest of the crew aboard, the Invincible. She could almost hear Ryan's voice in her ear, calm and steady. "For Earth. You look like you've got a lot on your mind." She turned to see Ben approaching, his limp less pronounced now thanks to weeks of physical therapy. He carried 2 cups of tea, offering one to her with a small smile. "Thought you could use this." "Thanks," Ava said, taking the cup gratefully. She sipped the warm liquid, letting it soothe her nerves. "Just thinking about tomorrow." Ben nodded, following her gaze to the stars. "Me too. I keep wondering if we're ready, if we've done enough." "We've done all we can," Ava replied firmly. "That's what matters. We've taken the pieces they left us and turned them into something stronger, something better." Ben chuckled softly. "You sound like Ryan." Ava smiled despite herself. "Maybe I do. He always knew how to keep us going even when things seemed impossible." They stood in silence for a while, watching the distant glow of alien fleets moving across the horizon. The Syndicate hadn't yet discovered their location, but it was only a matter of time. Tomorrow's attack would either buy humanity more time or mark the beginning of the end. When dawn broke, the Resistance fleet assembled outside the outpost. Dozens of ships, large and small, lined up in formation, their crews eager and resolute. Ava climbed aboard the lead vessel, a modified cruiser named Phoenix Rising, alongside Commander Vega and Dr. Ross. As the engines roared to life, Ava addressed the fleet over the comm system. "This is it," she said, her voice steady and clear. "For years they've hunted us, destroyed our homes, and tried to erase us from existence. But today we show them that humanity doesn't go quietly into the darkness. Today we fight. For Earth, for our families, and for everyone who didn't make it this far. Let's finish what the Invincible started." Her words were met with cheers and shouts of determination. The fleet surged forward, heading straight for the Syndicate's main depot. Along the way, decoy ships launched diversionary attacks, drawing enemy forces away from the target. By the time the Resistance reached the depot, its defenses were weakened and disorganized. "Now," Vega commanded, signaling the attack. The Resistance ships unleashed a barrage of fire targeting the depot's outer defenses. Explosions lit up the void as turrets were destroyed and barriers breached. Amid the chaos, Phoenix Rising positioned itself for the final blow. "Prepare Eclipse," Vega ordered. Dr. Ross activated the weapon, her hands trembling slightly as she monitored the reactor's output. "It's ready," she said, her voice tight with anticipation. "Fire," Vega said simply. With a deafening roar, Project Eclipse discharged, unleashing a beam of pure energy that tore through the depot's core. The resulting explosion was catastrophic, consuming the facility and scattering debris across space. The Syndicate fleet scrambled to respond, but it was too late. Their supply chain had been crippled. As the Resistance fleet retreated, cheers erupted aboard every ship. They had done the impossible. They had struck a blow that would resonate throughout the galaxy. The Syndicate's grip on humanity had been loosened, if only slightly. Back at the outpost, celebrations were subdued but heartfelt. The victory was bittersweet, tempered by the knowledge that the war was far from over. Still, the Resistance had proven that humanity could fight back and win. In the days that followed, stories of the battle spread far and wide. Hidden colonies whispered of the daring raid, and survivors began to emerge from the shadows, eager to join the cause. The legend of the Invincible lived on, inspiring hope in even the darkest corners of the galaxy. Ava stood once more beneath the stars, holding the data chip in her hand. She thought of Ryan, Lucas, and all the others who had given their lives to make this moment possible. Their sacrifice had ignited a spark, one that would burn brightly until humanity reclaimed its place among the stars. "For Earth," she whispered, clutching the chip tightly. "For all of you." End document. Document: one human warship, countless worlds turned to dust. Best HFY Sci-Fi. Years passed, and the galaxy changed. The raid on the Syndicate's main depot became a turning point in the war, a spark that ignited a flame of rebellion across human space. Survivors who had long given up hope emerged from hiding, drawn together by the stories of the Invincible and the resistance fighters who followed in its wake. Hidden colonies grew into fortified strongholds, their inhabitants armed and ready to fight back against the alien oppressors. Commander Elena Vega became a symbol of unity for humanity, her leadership inspiring others to rise up. Under her guidance, the resistance expanded, its ranks swelling with volunteers eager to reclaim what had been lost. New ships rolled off assembly lines, each bearing names like Carter's Resolve, Monroe's Legacy, and Drake's Fury, tributes to the brave men and women who had sacrificed everything aboard the Invincible. Lieutenant Ava Monroe played a key role in shaping the Resistance's future. She worked tirelessly to ensure Project Eclipse was adapted for widespread use, teaching engineers how to build and maintain the weapon. Though she never sought recognition, her name became synonymous with courage and resilience. Wherever humanity gathered to fight, whispers of Ava's determination spread, fueling the fires of defiance. Dr. Emily Ross continued her work as well, refining the design of Project Eclipse while also developing new technologies to aid the resistance. Her research gave humanity an edge it desperately needed, allowing them to stand toe-to-toe with the Syndicate's superior forces. But despite her contributions, she remained humble, always remembering the cost of their victories. Mia Chen and Ben Turner stayed close throughout the years, their bond forged in the crucible of loss and survival. Mia trained as a pilot, flying missions that tested her skills and resolve. Ben, though unable to return to combat due to his injury, served as a strategist, helping plan battles that turned the tide in humanity's favor. Together, they carried the memory of those who had fallen, ensuring their sacrifices were never forgotten. The war raged on, but humanity was no longer on the defensive. Emboldened by their early successes, the Resistance launched coordinated assaults on Syndicate outposts, supply lines, and command centers. Each victory brought them closer to reclaiming Earth, the cradle of their civilization. Scouts sent to survey the planet reported that much of it remained intact, though scarred by decades of neglect and conflict. It was a beacon of hope, a reminder of what they were fighting for. One day, a scavenger named Mia Dawson stumbled upon the wreckage of the Invincible. The once mighty warship lay buried beneath layers of asteroid debris, its hull battered and broken but still recognizable. As Mia explored the ruins, she discovered fragments of the ship's log, preserved in hardened data cores. Among them was Captain Ryan Carter's final message, a defiant declaration of humanity's refusal to surrender. Mia brought the logs to Commander Vega, who immediately recognized their significance. "This is what we've been missing," Vega said, holding the cracked data core in her hands. "A piece of our history, a reminder of where we came from and why we keep fighting." The discovery reignited humanity's spirit. The logs were broadcast across every colony and outpost, spreading Ryan's words far and wide. His voice echoed through the stars, steady and resolute. "We may fall, but we will never be forgotten." Inspired by these words, humanity redoubled its efforts. Ships bearing the names of fallen heroes patrolled the galaxy, their crews united by a shared purpose. Battles were won and lost, but the resistance never faltered. Slowly, inexorably, they pushed the Syndicate back, reclaiming territory, bit by bit. Finally, after years of relentless struggle, the moment came. Humanity launched a massive assault on the Syndicate's central command, a heavily fortified fortress orbiting a dying star. Led by Commander Vega aboard Phoenix Rising, the fleet fought with unmatched ferocity, their weapons blazing as they breached the enemy's defenses. At the heart of the battle, Ava activated a modified version of Project Eclipse, channeling every ounce of power into a single, devastating shot. The fortress erupted in a blinding explosion, signaling the end of Syndicate dominance. In the aftermath, the galaxy fell silent. For the first time in generations, humanity stood unopposed among the stars. Colonies began to rebuild, their skies free of alien invaders. Earth, though scarred, welcomed settlers eager to restore its beauty. Fields once reduced to ash bloomed anew, and cities rose from the rubble, stronger than before. On a remote moon near Earth's orbit, a monument was erected in honor of those who had fought and died for humanity's survival. It was a replica of the Invincible, etched with the names of its crew and all who had followed in their footsteps. Beneath it lay a plaque inscribed with Ryan's final words, a testament to the indomitable spirit of humanity. As Ava stood before the monument, tears streaming down her face, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The war was over, but the legacy of the Invincible would endure forever. Humanity had risen from the ashes, stronger and united, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Farther away, among the stars, the echoes of the Invincible's sacrifice continued to inspire. New generations of explorers, scientists, and warriors carried its story with them, ensuring that no one would ever forget the price of freedom. And as humanity stepped boldly into the cosmos once more, they did so with hope in their hearts and fire in their souls. For Earth, for all of us. Document